think it must have been Andrew that reached out to me, I believe, but I've been actually wanting to do an episode on Munchausen for a long time. I actually wrote a letter to what's her name in prison, the famous
Gypsy
Munchausen.
Blanchard.
Yeah. And she said she would do the podcast, and then she got out of jail and she didn't do the
fame.
podcast.
Yeah.
She didn't have time for me anymore, but yeah, it's interesting to me that case really put Munchausen and Munchausen by Proxy on the map. And were you working with this before case?
I had no involvement in that case.
No, but I mean, were you working in Munchausen?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Before that though?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've been in this field. Yeah. This field inducted me. I'll put it that way. It's not anything I asked for since 2009. And,
really?
Yeah. So long before the Gypsy Blanchard case.
Wow. Okay. So when that case came out, you're like, yeah, I've been telling everyone this is a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And, you will still have some people who deny that, there's a whole, how the internet is. There's a whole internet group out there is like, she was never a victim of Munchausen by proxy. And she's just a scammer. I'm like, look, she absolutely was a victim of Munchausen by proxy. I don't know if she's a scammer now. I do know that the only thing she was ever taught by her mother was manipulation. And that's an extremely hard cycle to break. And she had 23 years of it. I don't begrudge her fame out of this. And I think they got the sentence about right. About 10 years for her was about what she deserved. She may have had a decent self-defense claim if she had actually done the murder herself.
Right. So you are a police officer?
I am a retired police detective, 40 years experience, 15 years in investigating crimes against children. And Munchausen by proxy, my first case was in 2009. Then I just retired earlier this year in January.
I see. So now you're an author? I'm sorry,
yes.
I'm so confused now.
Yes. Me and Andrea Dunlap is my co-author. Sister. Andrea believes her sister is committing and getting away with this abuse in Seattle. And, she was a novelist. And we had a chance meeting at a conference on this abuse. Dr. Mark Feldman had been introduced to her. And
I know that name.
I just threw out the idea, hey, I got these 3 cases. I think it'd make for, people always telling me I should write a book when I tell them about the weirdness of these cases. And she at the conference, she told me, Mike, people tell me that all the time. And normally I think in my head, you shouldn't write a book. She's like, you should write a book. Of course, at that moment, no one cares what I have to say. She's worked in the publishing industry. She's published 4 novels. And I'm like, I need to figure out a way to get her to co-author it. And at the same time, she's thinking in her head, man, I really want to co-author this with him, but I don't want to jump into anything. But so, I tried to write it, and I write like a cop. And it was a lot of, on this date, I went here, I did that. On this date, I went here, I did that. And that didn't really make for real compelling writing. And she was helping me on it. And she finally said, hey, why don't I just write this with you? I'm like, that's a freaking great idea. And really, it adds
co-authored by proxy.
Oh, Munchausen by proxy, 3 cases.
No, co-authored by proxy.
Co-authored by proxy, yes. Well, sorry. And and so she, it was a 3 to, she had a baby in the middle of this, and our editor had a baby in the middle of this, and I was still working full time, so it was a I won't say labor of love, but it was a process. Learned a lot along the way. Very interesting process. It's called The Mother Next Door: Medicine, Deception, and Munchausen by Proxy. Andrea also does a podcast called Nobody Should Believe Me, which is about this topic also.
Okay.
Should I not have said that?
No, I didn't realize. It's a series, right? It's not like I just listened to that not too long ago, and I didn't realize that's the same person.
Yeah, and I highly recommend season 6 of that podcast. It has nothing to do with me. I'm involved just in trying to get things done behind the scenes. But if people listen to that, you will know how terrible the systems that are built to deal with child abuse aren't dealing with this form of child abuse. They literally are lost on this. And it's a lot of work, and it's, they aren't trained, and it becomes a human nature thing where it's easy just to dismiss it and say, oh, mom's not doing it, or, oh, it's a CPS issue if you're police, or if you're CPS, oh, I can't prove it. Instead of digging in and doing the hard work. These investigations, they can take up to 6 months sometimes.
Yeah. And so are you one of the only professional, or before you retired, one of the only professional like law enforcement people really specializing in this?
Consistently doing these cases, yes. There's since become one other, Michael Lee down in Montgomery County. He called me on a case about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago. And, it's funny with cops, because this is going to come as a shock to you, but cops have egos. So a lot of times they don't reach out and ask questions. I can do this. I got, or on the other hand, they can also be lazy and they don't want to ask questions, because that means then they'd have to work. But Mike reached out to me, and, he was his first case. I feel his pain. So I offered, I kind of gave him a roadmap, and he did a great job. And I think since that first case, I think he's had 7 or 8 of these in the last 3 years. So, they're not rare. I tell people all the time, Munchausen by proxy is not rare. It's rarely identified. And when it is identified, it's very rarely properly investigated by CPS and police, if they ever investigate it. And family court is terrible at dealing with this abuse. And to be clear about Munchausen, your audience may not know what Munchausen by proxy is. I don't want to assume
maybe we should
anything.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about that first.
So Munchausen by proxy, the definition I have for it is when a caregiver, usually the mother, intentionally, very key word, exaggerates, falsifies, or induces illness in her child. And the motive for that is usually attention, something intrinsic. And, there are two different, it's called many things. It's Munchausen by proxy. The medical community has now started calling it medical child abuse, because they don't care about a motive. If you're intentionally over-medicalizing your child for any reason, they label it medical child abuse. If you're doing it for profit, if you're doing it like to get your child declared disabled so you can get a government check, they don't care about that motive. That's not their business. And it shouldn't be. That should be law enforcement's and CPS's business, right? But it's also in the DSM. So the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Illness. It was only put in there in 2013. It is, the DSM calls it a factitious disorder imposed on another. Now, the difference between medical child abuse is, for the psych definition, it has to be something intrinsic, has to be the main motivating factor. There can be side financial gain, but the main motivating factor has to be that intrinsic gain, whether it be attention seeking, love, whatever that may be. And that's the difference. That's the only difference between medical child abuse and factitious disorder imposed on another, is the motive in doing it. If on the psych side, if they're doing it for financial gain, then it's malingering by proxy.
So if it's in the DSM-5 or whatever the version is out now, so it's considered a mental illness, because it's pretty freaking crazy to do that.
Well, you know what's been in
in
the DSM since 1952?
Oh, is that right? Okay.
You know what has?
What?
Pedophilia. Now, when someone commits child sexual assault, do we say, oh, well, they just, they have this little pedophilia problem? No, we don't do that. We know now. No. We used to in the 60s, it will stay away from Uncle Joe. He has a problem with kids, right?
Right.
And we've since educated our way out of it. And I say all the time, from a understanding perspective, we are about where we were in the 60s on child sexual assault, and in the 90s on child trafficking with this abuse.
So your first case that you ever worked on, had you heard of anything like this before you started?
No.
So that must have been.
Yeah. I had to
explain that case to me.
Yeah. Well, and the very first one, so I had retired from Arlington PD. I was in their Crimes Against Children's unit, and I went to the local DA's office into their Crimes Against Children's unit, and Alana Minton, my chief prosecutor of that unit, said, hey, we got this case. The police department really didn't want anything to do with it. There were legitimate jurisdictional issues. the abuse was split between states. And so I'm like, yeah, I'll try it. And I did a terrible job because I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned. I reached out to Dr. Mark Feldman. He was the only one on the internet at the time, only resource out there.
Why do I know that name?
Dr. Mark Feldman, he's an expert on this abuse. He's published 5 books. He's peer reviewed over 100, I would guess over 100 times on this abuse. And he gave me guidance as a prosecutor, Michael Trent, down in Houston, had tried a couple of these cases, and he gave me guidance just on what needs to be done. My child abuse pediatrician, Dr. Jamie Kaufman, gave me great guidance. And I kind of, did a lot of things wrong in that investigation, but did some things right. All the surgeries, which in my state, if it's a falsification case, if they're just falsifying falsifying medical history to get procedures done, which is incredibly easy to do, I have to have a jurisdiction, right? So all the surgeries in that case happened out of state. They happened in another state, in Ohio, in Cleveland. Gave it to the Cleveland PD. They didn't do anything with it. I'm sure they're, and again, the human nature factor. And you got a busy police department. They got a ton of cases. They see something that they don't understand, that's hard, and it's real easy to just say, well, that's a CPS issue. I'm going to move on to another case. Real easy to do. And I didn't do a great job investigating that case. So nothing happened with that. The kid was separated. He'd come into the hospital, feeding tube, central line, on TPM, which is nutrition through the veins. And, the doctor, I still remember in his affidavit, he's like, yeah, mom left the floor, so he let the kid just run up and down the hospital wing, and mom saying the kid needed a wheelchair. And that was kind of my introduction. By the time the kid left the hospital, out of mom's care, removed from mom's care by CPS, he was feeding tube removed, central line removed, eating, normal, healthy child.
God, how old was the kid?
Oh, gosh, how old was he? He was young. He was 4 or 5. And and from that case, after that case, I went to my chief prosecutor and I'm like, hey, I learned a few things. These are hard. They take a lot of work. It's going to be tough for a detective with 30, 40 cases on his caseload. Why don't you just give me more of these to come into me? And she's like, Mike, that's fine. I've been here 8 years. So first one we've had. And I'm like, well, that's in Atlanta. That's freaking great because they're a lot of work. And we got Hope Ybarra, the first story in the book. We got her a month later. And with that case, I really learned a lot and really learned the depravity that these offenders can possess.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, like to what extremes do these, would it be a perpetrator or I don't know what you would.
Yeah, definitely a perpetrator. They absolutely know what they're doing is wrong when they are doing it, which is a legal definition of sanity.
Right.
And, they will demonstrate to me when I interview them, they'll lie to me. I'll give them some information they didn't know I have. They'll change their story to accommodate that information, gotcha. And they'll keep changing their story. And I may get admissions or they may never tell me, or I may not get admissions. And that's every abusive head trauma interview I've ever had. That's every physical abuse, every sexual abuse interview that I've ever had with child offenders. I mean, they present no different in a professional police interview setting than any other type of child abuse offender, or really any other type of offender for that matter.
Right.
And they're lying to cover their tracks. That's how you know that they know what they did was wrong, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, some of the depravity in the Ybarra case, she went to the lengths of stealing pathogens. She was a lab supervisor at a food testing lab and had access to pathogens.
What's a pathogen?
She would put into her child through her child's breathing treatment.
What is a pathogen? I have to warn you, I'm not smart.
That's okay. Everyone knows, we all know what staph is, right? You get a staph
infection.
Staph is one of the things she put into her daughter's lungs. Pseudomonas aeruginosa, another pathogen. Strep. Veridans is another, and we know that commonly as strep. And these are things that can cause serious blood infections, polymicrobial blood infections, multiple organisms in the blood, which can cause you to be septic and cause you to die. But that's not all she did. She falsified a cystic fibrosis test. She did a bunch of things. You can read them in the book. Yeah, another plug for the book.
I was supposed to give you shit. Yeah, we know you have a book.
Yeah,
no, kidding.
No, but I've had offenders who have suffocated their children. Recently, I got 60 years on offender Jessica Jones, who poisoned her child with Benadryl to simulate the seizure disorder to make the child shake. And it was a 4-year-old child that she admitted giving up to 4 adult strength Benadryl at a time to the child. And I believe that's a minimization. I believe it was probably closer to 8.
So her kid passed?
Her kid did not. Thankfully, a very smart Cook's Children's who've been pretty good at identifying this abuse caught on to it and held her inpatient while they ran a blood test. And she had come in before, and they had done a blood test, and the blood test didn't come back by the time she had been released. And it came back with Benadryl when she hadn't given a history of Benadryl. So they were suspicious. Things weren't adding up. She was also presenting her 11-year-old as having a seizure disorder with no positive EEG medical testing. And so this time they held her. It came back positive. I went and confronted her at the hospital, and she gave admissions, not a full confession, but admissions. And, the sad thing about that case is she had bond conditions of no contact with any child under 17. Weirdly, I rarely get that. I had a really good magistrate judge. I rarely get that on these type of cases. Think about that. This has a 6 to 9% mortality rate. You're going to let these people be around kids? But magistrating judges often do. I can't make you understand this if you're not intellectually curious. But she did have bond conditions. And then, she was arrested, and we're going through the process. She had poisoned just about every kid she had been around. I did multiple interviews with the forensic interviews. I don't do the interviewing with the children, and who all said, yeah, she'd give us purple pills that would make us shake. And she bonded out. She didn't have an ankle monitor. She was allowed to move. I'm in Fort Worth, which is North Texas. For those of y'all listening don't know, Texas is a big state. And she was allowed to move down south of Houston on the coast, a good 5 hours away. No ankle monitor, no monitoring, no anything. She got a boyfriend. She medicated his kids, was around his kids all the time. She had lied about being a nurse. She had lied about having cancer herself. That new boyfriend's ex-wife got suspicious, Googled her online, saw the media on her arrest, and called me and said, hey, she's around my kids all the time. She didn't have any pictures, but she's like, I know someone who does have a picture. My ex's baby mama. She's got a picture of and text messages. Here's her number. So I called her. She's like, yeah, she's been around my kid. I got a picture of her holding my child in a park. So she sent me that. She sent me the text messages in which Jessica was still. She sent her text messages of her kids she hadn't been around for over a year and a half in the hospital saying, my child's still going through this. Her child was fine. The kids, as soon as separated, they were perfectly healthy.
God.
So I arrest her. That's a bond violation, which is actual separate criminal offense. And it's your first offense, a misdemeanor on its own.
And she's still in the same state.
Still in state. So I get a warrant and we get her in custody. And
Jesus.
I scream at the DA's office, do a revocation hearing, do something. Because she's obviously not stopping her behavior. They don't. She bonds out for like $200. She goes online. And this is good. This is a good story about how depraved these offenders can be. She goes online on a dating app using a former last name, meets a new boyfriend in July. She had delayed her sentencing hearing by claiming medical ailments in herself that were untrue. Her sentencing hearing is finally set for August 9th. She gets this boyfriend in July. He has a 12-year-old daughter who has no mother in her life. He also has a son with another lady. She starts staying at his house, telling him and his mom she's a nurse at the county hospital. She's not. She has no nursing license at all. She starts medicating his daughter, and the daughter testified at the sentencing hearing that she would feel dizzy when Jessica would medicate her, but perfectly fine when her dad would. And then she tells the daughter, or she asks dad, hey, can your daughter come with me August 1st? I'm getting my kids back from standard visitation for the month of July with their dad, and we're going to an out-of-state softball tournament. Can your daughter come with us? And dad's like, I got to work. And she's like, well, she can come with us on her own. And dad was like, I don't know. And then later she joked both the dad and daughter, if anything ever happens to your dad, I'll just kidnap you. Keep in mind, her sentencing hearing is August 9th. Thankfully, he had another son and that the mom had custody of. And that mom met Jessica and was just kind of weirded out by her. So she Googled her first name, which is spelled weirdly, and the community, small community that they lived in, and found her arrest article. And she called in a CPS report, which that dad he had no idea. He had no clue. He was extremely cooperative. So I arrested her again, and she was held that time finally after she had poisoned multiple additional children, because our DA's office here they just don't take these cases seriously. They don't view them. God. They don't view these offenders as a continued threat to children.
God, I had no idea that these people would, like, if they, what am I trying to say? I had no idea that, like, I thought it was just their own kid, and then, and then, but like, it's like they just, I mean, I shouldn't say they, because I mean, I suppose every case is a little different, but like some of them have that drive to just do this to children. It's not even like it's
the more advanced offenders, the ones that are inducing symptoms in their children. I mean, it's a compulsion, very similar to a sex offender compulsion. It's not, and Dr. Brenda Bursch and Dr. Mary Sanders in their accepts treatment model, their offender treatment paper. The very first step is admitting your entire course of conduct. And that hardly ever happens with these offenders. Hardly.
It's like a 12-step group kind of.
It's very similar. Yeah. It's very similar to sex offender treatment.
Interesting. Not that I know anything about that, but
yeah,
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I do just because of my profession. But if I want to have anyone evaluate these offenders, I want it to be a psych professional who does sex offender treatment, because they will get the need to verify everything.
Well,
yeah. So, and I've had other cases, I've had suffocation cases in the hospital to present signs of apnea. I've had mothers who have taken fecal matter and put it in the child's IV line to cause a polymicrobial blood infection. Gosh. God. Numerous G tubes. So gastric tubes is the most common surgery. And that's because gastric issues are the easiest thing they're the hardest thing to medically diagnose, to medically test for, right? They rely a lot on the medical history provided by the caregiver. Mom is, and I say mom, there is a study, I'm not a sexist, a study looked at 796 cases of this abuse, 2017 study, that were in literature, and 95.6% of the offenders were the mother, and 97.6% were female. Now, we can talk about why that is. Dr. Feldman will tell you that every culture that he knows of on the face of the earth, the female is a primary medical caretaker for the child. So is it a crime of opportunity, or is it something inherently female? We don't have the research to know.
Yeah. It sounds like it's almost like a cluster B personality disorder.
Very good.
Or a symptom of, or a characteristic of.
The most common psych comorbidity is Munchausen, which is doing it to yourself, right? The second most is a cluster B, either narcissistic, borderline, or histrionic.
Wow. Yeah.
And
are these people, are they usually like have some kind of trauma in their life? Like, was there something that, like, I know it's like a mixture of nature and nurture, but like, is there some kind of history in their life of traumas?
Well, the problem is so many of them are pathological liars, right?
Right.
Unless there is some type of documented, witnessed thing in their childhood, who knows? Who knows if they're telling you the truth or not? I tell investigators when I teach on this, CPS and police investigators, if these offenders tell you the sky is blue, go outside and look up. You have to confirm everything, confirm every little detail, because they are compulsive liars. They really are, especially when you get to the ones that are inducing symptoms. And, if they're lying about their job, Hope said she was a PhD. She'd never been to grad school. I've had multiples of these say they were nurses and they never have been. I had one say she was an Army medic in Iraq, had her arm chopped off and reattached with a helicopter blade and reattached. She was none of that. Never happened. They're just very convincing liars.
That's
Unfortunately, our systems like CPS in my state has no policies on this abuse. They provide no training to their investigators on this abuse. And they don't have a box to check when it comes in. So it'll often come in as medical neglect. And then you got a young CPS worker going out there, doesn't even know what this is, and sees a mom taking her child to the doctor all the time. Well, that's not medical neglect. I'm going to close my case.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
Yeah,
she's
exactly.
diligent.
Right.
Meanwhile, these poor kids are getting like surgeries that they have no business getting. That is,
Yeah,
actually,
gosh, I'm just trying to think of all the different cases that I've had and the methods that they've done. Numerous NG tubes. Those are less severe cases, right? They're just a third-degree felony here in the state of Texas. It causes physical pain. But a great example, that there are any cops or CPS workers listening, I always like for medical people to get something everyone can understand, right? A description everyone can understand. So when I ask them, I had a nurse tell me, well, what is it? How do you know? What would you say an NG tube feels like that's being placed? And the nurse was like, well, the COVID test, the long scramble your brain up the nose, cotton swab COVID test. I'm like, yeah. She's like, a little bit worse than that. So I'm like, okay, well, that hurt me when I got it. So I know that's physical pain. And that way I have, that's exactly what I put in the warrant was that description. So the judge would also understand it.
Right.
But yeah,
well, that's one good thing of COVID is at least people can relate to what you're saying that way.
Yeah. Well, and these offenders, they will pick. I used to wonder if they all had a playbook because we kept seeing the same thing over and over, apnea issues, neurological issues, GI issues, just same thing over and over and over again. And what I've realized is they do the research and they pick things that are very hard to medically test for, which is why we see so many feeding tubes. Because, and if you think about it, you go to the doctor, how long do you spend talking to your doctor?
I don't even like going to the doctors.
I know. We're in the same boat there.
Very, very, very short.
Yeah.
Periods.
They're in the room with you 10, 15 minutes if you're lucky. And if you tell them your leg hurts, they're going to look at your leg. Right? It's very weird with people. They'll either get that automatically and go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That's what I did when my child abuse pediatrician told me that. And then you'll have people who are just like, yeah, but it's a doctor. Yeah, but doctors are people. Doctors are just as fallible as anyone else. And the thing is, they receive no training on this abuse in medical school. It's not taught to them at all. So your podcast listeners will probably know more about this abuse than their local pediatrician does after the podcast is over. And in my state, there is an hour continuing education mandated a year for pediatricians for child trafficking. There's nothing for this. And I would argue there is as likely, if not more likely, to see this as there are human trafficking. And we tried to get that bill passed through the legislature last year, and they wouldn't even give it. They wouldn't even give it a vote in committee.
I don't understand why.
Well, there's a lot of groups that don't want this looked at.
But why? Because they like inflicting pain on their kids?
What these offenders are very good at, they're very good manipulators. They're obviously very good liars. And these offenders can hide in groups, like the Danita Tutt case here in Tarrant County, which I think that was 2018 when that went to trial. Her entire church group was there in support, packed the courtroom. Now, what effect does it have on an elected judge? What effect does that have on a jury, see all that support? Yeah, and she was convicted of attempted murder and injury to a child, serious bodily injury. She had her child in hospice and was attempting to cut off his food and water. But for a very courageous hospice nurse who ended up losing her job because of it, indirectly because of it, she conned the con artist into going home for 36 hours and just said, hey, you want something to eat? The kid's like, yeah, you got any burritos? And he scarfed down 3 burritos with no problem. And mom's saying he has all these gastric issues he can't eat. He can't tolerate TPN, which is nutrition through the vein, which is impossible not to tolerate. But parents have control in a medical setting. That's something else people don't understand. Cannot do anything without parental consent in the hospital.
Right.
I mean, they can't. If mom says my child can't eat, they cannot feed that child unless they can talk mom into letting the child eat. Their only alternative is call CPS.
You're kind of freaking me out.
It's not hard to commit, and it's much more common than people realize. And we're at the point now where we only catch it very, very late in the process.
Yeah.
And if y'all will listen to season 6 of the podcast, you'll realize it wasn't caught and that child's dead.
Well, that was my next question. How often does a child pass and then they get caught? And I wonder how many, like, you think of like,
well, the best example of that is a conviction is the Olivia Gant case in Colorado, where she did basically the same thing as the Danita Tutt case, where she got her child put in hospice, claimed her child couldn't tolerate food or drink. And there's an interview with her grandpa who said he went to visit her and she woke up in hospice after mom had cut off TPN, all nutrition, all water, all everything. She woke up and looked at his grandpa and said, "Papa, I'm hungry." And she passed a couple of days later. And the only way they found out about her, she was already dead and buried when mom then started in on her next child and was presenting a false cancer diagnosis on her next child. And she had changed pediatricians, and this new pediatrician got suspicious, looked at all the old medical records, and reported. And a great, great criminal investigation was done by Douglas County Sheriff's Office. I mean, that's a very, very cold case murder, right? And they were able to get enough evidence that I consulted a bit with the prosecutor on the case. He didn't have a separation period, which we need, right? We need to separate the child and prove that away from the mother, this child is fine. He didn't have that period because the child's dead. And He also had an ME who I thought was pretty gutless and would only rule it undetermined, wouldn't have ruled it murder after they dug the child back up and did an autopsy. She, in her report, she found no signs of any of the gastro issues that mom had indicated, yet she wouldn't call it murder. And so that hindered him. She ended up pleading to 16 years in prison to a lesser of, I think, injury to a child. But whatever, she's in prison. And it's not going to go well for her there. And that is the rarity in these cases, that they do go to prison. And in season 6, that offender, and I'll call her an offender because she was caught and she was prosecuted and she was found guilty on a previous child. And she was caught on video, on covert video surveillance over 50 times, placing feces in that child's trachea in order to cause a polymicrobial blood infection, and then squirting water down the trachea to suffocate the child, basically waterboard the child. The child lived. She then went on to, she got 6 months in jail. So a very light sentence. Mm-hmm. This was 25 years ago. Very lack of understanding even back then. And we're about the same level today, sadly. And CPS actually wrote in their report that mom will be cured of Munchausen by proxy in 6 months. I mean, it's like a personality disorder. It's never cured. It's a compulsion that they have to control.
Yeah. And, you can treat it. You can't cure it.
Right. Well, she got out of jail. She served her 6 months, got out of jail. A year later, had a little boy, went to CPS, took the boy away, went back to family court to get the boy back, got all of her children back, and then started on a little boy. Was reported again to CPS. She left the state, ran to Alabama, found a extremely gullible, is about the nicest way I'll describe this neurologist, who diagnosed this child with a non-fatal illness, but yet mom was able to get this child somehow placed in hospice, cut off his food and water, is the theory, and the child passed away. And that case has never been criminally investigated. I've reached out to multiple agencies in Alabama, and they just don't seem interested. Yeah. I mean, and again, you know, we tried to reach out before the podcast aired, but I couldn't find anyone there interested at Birmingham PD. So, you know, I've made other inquiries, higher up offices there in Alabama, and so far, nothing. And look, maybe that child actually had an illness. You don't know unless you actually do an investigation. And what Andrea was able to do, the podcast host, again, my co-author, the older sister participated, the oldest sister, not the one that was abused, participated and We have recorded, she has over 2 hours of recordings with the neurologist who says, I don't know if that child ever had the disease that I diagnosed the child with. I'm worried that I may have, that your mom may have used me. And she has conversations between that oldest child and the mom. She has mom's blogs, she described it as 3 books of information, mom's social media and blogs. The way you can work these cases, the way you prove that mom is lying about the health of the child is you take all of the information mom posts on blogs, on social media, all that's dated, right? There's a date and time stamp on it. Put it in a spreadsheet by date, everything they post, what they're saying about the child's health. Obviously, not everything, but whatever they're saying pertaining to the child's health, which is most of this lady's post. And then you compare it to the medical record and you just see the lies pop out. There'll be a fine doctor visit here, and she's posting online. The doctor said, my child's terminal is going to die. I'm just using that as that didn't happen in this case. I'm just using that as an example. A real life example that happened in one of my cases is that offender sent a Facebook message to a friend that my child's oxygen levels are at 30. He's coded 3 times. We're in the hospital. They were in the hospital. And when I looked at the hospital record for that day, it was a normal day. The kid never coded. Now, medical professionals may not chart everything, but they're going to chart if a child coded, especially if a child coded 3 times. And
right.
That just wasn't in the records. And by the way, that lady did plead guilty to a sweetheart of a deal, a 5-year deferred adjudication probation sentence. She was caught on video falsifying vomiting in her child over 20 times and breaking the G-tube to cause a procedure on video. And
God,
she was allowed to plead guilty to 5-year deferred adjudication sentence by our DA's office, and they left the child in the home with the offender.
You have the most frustrating job I've ever heard of.
Kind of why I retired. There's a lot of reasons. And, I do want to so the book has 2 stories with positive outcomes, and it's got the last story is not so positive. And people need to understand that the last story is more the norm than the first 2. And that is the story of Mary Welch. And she had a brain shunt placed in her child. And,
Jesus.
She falsified being a nurse, 2 doctors. She's never been a nurse. By the way, she's still falsifying being a nurse to the citizens that she represents as a city council member of Grandview, Texas. And she's a member. She actually ended up pleading. The only thing she pled guilty to in that case, she pled guilty to Medicaid fraud, right at $8,000 worth. And she's now a member of the Johnson County Central Appraisal District Board and has access to all the Johnson County voters' Social Security numbers. Her story's in the book. And we name her in the book. And we can prove everything that's in the book. It's been vetted by 3 different sets of attorneys.
I was going to say, has anyone ever tried to sue you for stuff? But I guess it's public knowledge.
Not yet. It could happen tomorrow, but not yet.
God. Have you talked to anyone that has Munchausen by proxy, done the treatment, and like you've talked to them and they are like not cured, but they're...
I haven't talked to any of them. I've talked to, I serve on the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children's Munchausen by Proxy committee with a lot of people who have a lot more impressive letters behind their name than me. Dr. Kathy Ayub from Harvard, she told me, she's done extensive offender treatment, and she can count on one hand the amount of people that she think have truly been able to change their behavior. And they're almost always cases that I would never see because they wouldn't rise to a criminal level. Right. So they're
they're caught early.
They're very low level. They're caught early. And they're open. When people do bad things that aren't as serious, they're more open to admitting and changing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Wow. I actually,
when you're looking at a 20-year sentence in jail, you're probably not going to admit your behavior.
Right. When you're doing, like you said, some of these really insidious things, it's pretty hard to admit to doing. Because they're kids. And I know it happens to also not kids. Like there are caregivers to adults that are also like doing things and keeping their spouse or father or whatever ill
Very
for
interesting
whatever reason.
on the very first case. And this is a little tidbit that's not in the book. And I don't know if I've ever said this publicly.
I love it when people tell me that.
Yeah. Well, on Hope Ybarra, the mom who had stole pathogens, put them into her children, she ended up pleading guilty. I got admissions from her, and she faked being a PhD. She ended up pleading guilty. She'd faked cancer in herself. Her whole family believes she had cancer, but she served 10 years in prison. When she got out, she moved to Idaho, where she changed her name legally to her maiden name. And because she had never got arrested under a maiden name or anything, it didn't show up on her criminal history. And so she got a job as an in-home caretaker for a 92-year-old hospice patient who then died in her care.
Huh. Coincidence?
Well, he was terminal. The police, God bless them, the very small police department that responded, and this is how I know about it, they knew about Hope. They had seen something on the internet about her. One of the mini documentaries, I think. Star Telegram did like a 30-minute mini film documentary on her case. I think that's what they saw. And when the coroner, not medical examiner, when the coroner got there, coroner in that county is an elected official who doesn't have to have, he just has to be popular. He doesn't have to have any medical training.
Coroners are elected?
In small counties across this nation, yes.
Well, I'm in Canada. I don't know if you know that. But
oh yeah, no, I know I didn't. Yeah. Just
that baffles me.
Yeah, and so they made him watch the video and said, "Please, please request an autopsy," and he didn't do it. So, yeah, so they're on lookout for her.
Good God!
Again,
I actually watched.
I don't know what happened, but there's, as compulsive as they are, there's always a possibility something happened.
Right. There's a Netflix documentary out right now. I don't want to. Okay, it's called. Oh my God, I can't remember. Something about catfish.
Yeah, the mom who catfished her own daughter.
You gave it away.
Yeah.
And one of the people in the documentary said this is kind of like Munchausen by proxy via digital age.
There's actually a debate within our community. I do not think it is.
No?
Well, look, we don't need to ascribe all weird female behavior toward their offspring. All criminal female behavior toward their offspring as Munchausen by proxy. And I think the reason why a lot of people do that is they want to give them an excuse for the behavior. We do not want our perception or societal perception of motherhood disturbed. We don't want that to happen. And, when I was at the DA's office, just on other types of child abuse cases, whether it be physical abuse, sexual abuse, abusive head trauma, female offenders who offended on their own children got far lighter sentences than males who offended on their own children. Because we just don't want to believe. We want to believe a mother's good, right? And they can be just as evil as men. It's just sometimes it takes a different form.
They're just better at it.
Well,
I'm cutting that out.
I think Andrea would tell you that they're more manipulative about it. It's
right.
More into the poisoning, the more manipulative type crimes. That's where their power lies.
Yeah.
Men's power lies with physical strength. So you see with men, it's more aggressive, assaultive behavior.
Right. I'm curious about some of the men that have, like you said, what was it, 94.7% or something, or 90, whatever it was. So the select few males that have had Munchausen by proxy, or I'm curious.
I can only speak to my case. I know there are some in the literature. I think there's actually a video on the internet of a dad suffocating his baby in the hospital setting to present signs of apnea, which I've had a case of that also. Actually, a couple of cases here in Tarrant County of that. But all of my offenders have all been women. They've all been the mother except one, and she was the grandmother, and she had done it to her previous child.
Right. Wow. Now I don't trust women.
Trust but verify.
I'm kidding. Yeah, exactly. Wow. I mean, it's sad. It's just, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of lost for words right now. It's more than I thought it was.
Well, and I do have to push the book a little bit.
Sure, sure.
It is very educational also. And the good thing about doing the 3 cases that I really didn't even consider, but is really, and we've had several actual reviewers say this, is having those 3 cases shows you the pattern with these offenders. And you start to see these same things in all of these cases. And it becomes pretty clear, patterns do not make a conviction, right? They do not make guilt, but they're a huge red flag that everything needs to be looked at. And if there are any cops listening, there is a great chance that the offender will get possession of the kids and will continue to abuse the kids if you do nothing, if you do not do a proper criminal investigation. I know it's hard. I know it sucks. I know it takes time. And I know your DA may not do anything about it once you're done. That is always a possibility, but that's not my concern. My concern is to do my job and to do my criminal investigation if I have probable cause to arrest.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose some people think, or some police officers think, we've scared them enough. Like we've poked them enough that they're gonna.
Yeah.
If they are being abusive, they know we're on to them and they'll stop. But that's not how obsessions work.
No.
Yeah.
That would be like giving a strong.
Ooh, I got away with nothing.
Yeah, that'd be like giving a strong talking to a sex offender and expecting him to change his behavior.
Right. If anything, it might actually empower them thinking, hey, I got away with it.
Right. Well, and I think the advanced offenders, it's always been my theory that they actually get some type of mental charge out of fooling people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Potentially people that maybe even people they perceive as maybe at a higher station, social station, or higher intelligence than themselves.
Yeah. It makes me wonder how many kids in history have died and no one knows.
And no one knows.
And it was due to something like this.
Well, and in season 6 of the podcast, if that sister hadn't come forward and helped with everything, and if she hadn't found a treasure trove of documents in her mother's basement when she was helping her mom clean out for a move, there would be no, people still wouldn't be questioning that child's death.
Yeah.
And it's a sad listen. But if the topic interests you, that's the season you should listen to. Just go straight to that season. And I say that with my 2 investigations being the first 2 seasons. So you probably heard enough of my voice anyway by this time.
Well, if someone reads your book or listens to the podcast or is somewhat knowledgeable and they suspect that someone is doing this, whether it's a family member or a friend or a wife, what should they do?
I always advocate, if you suspect that abuse is happening, you report abuse. And with this abuse, I advocate to report to both CPS and police and hope one of them understands it and gets it. And you are in Canada. A lot of people are like, well, we have national healthcare system. That can't happen here because all the record. No, that can absolutely happen there. And it has happened there. Or do you really think a doctor's going to go back and look at 20,000 pages of medical records before he treats a child and compare every medical history mom's given to every other medical history? No, he's not going to do that. He couldn't treat the child if he did. He'd have to delay care months for that child. They do rely, just like in America, they rely on the history provided by the caregiver, and it can just as easily happen there as here. And we see these cases, and a lot of people are like, "Is this a white Western woman thing?" I don't know where the white comes from, but no, we see this in all cultures.
Weird.
There's cases in Saudi Arabia. There's cases in Japan. There's cases in India. There's cases all over of this abuse. And it has nothing to do with any type of culture or any other dynamic. It's throughout every socioeconomic class. Offenders can be rich, they can be poor. It just doesn't matter. The rich ones tend to get off more.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. Right. So what if they reach out to the CPS and the police and they don't really do anything?
That is extremely possible. And all you can do is be the greasy spoke. At least you've known you've done your part.
So there's no other like organizations they could reach out to?
Munchausen
Or
Support is a great organization that, again, my co-author started. Really, they have focus groups or support groups, not focus groups, support groups for, victims who were victims in their childhood who are now adults and now just coming to realize they were victims. They have support groups for dads. And, these dads who actually tried to do something are oftentimes just treated terribly by family court. The last article in the Juvenile and Family Court Journal on this abuse was in 1990. Can you think of two things that may have happened since 1990 that's changed the dynamics of attention seeking in our society greatly? Maybe the internet, maybe social media.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah. The internet. I mean, if you were going to commit this abuse in 1993, you'd have to have some medical knowledge, right? You'd have to either that or you'd have to go to the library and study. And now
the encyclopedia.
Now it's a 5-minute
Remember
Google
those?
search.
Yeah,
to get everything
exactly.
you need to go into a doctor and present false symptoms. And then for the attention-seeking aspect, you got it at your finger. And you'll see these offenders on covert video. They're not even paying attention to the kid in the hospital bed. They're on their devices constantly seeking that. And so the attention-seeking is that both the means and the satisfaction is at their fingertips to commit this abuse.
Wow. So you're blaming the internet?
Oh no, it's just
no. I'm kidding.
It's just fuel to fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
Off topic. What part of Canada are you in?
I'm in Regina, Saskatchewan.
I do know where that's at. My best friend from high school lives in Pemberton, BC. I was just up there last month.
Okay. I mean, that's still probably a 2 days drive from here.
Yeah.
It's a big country, but yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
What, you mean all Canadians don't know each other?
I know, I've had that before too, traveling. It's like,
yeah, I bet.
Maybe you know my cousin in Toronto. I'm like, no, that's a 5-hour flight, so I doubt it. Wow. Well, I'm trying to think if, I don't think I had any other questions scribbled down here. I mean, I could come up with lots more questions. This is like, to me, this is fascinating because it is so bizarre and I can't relate. And it's so bananas. And especially that it's so, not very many things are divided by sex or gender like this. Like it's even makes it even more fascinating to me.
Oh, and there are people out there that will tell you that this abuse doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. I'm like, okay, well, I've got 8 confessions. Are they all just false confessions?
And these aren't people that have Munchausen by proxy. They're just people that,
I mean,
I don't understand.
I don't know. Do they? I don't know. I don't know their history with their kids. People
are so weird.
Well, and there's definitely a industry in being a defense attorney witness,
I suppose. And I mean, yeah, the medical system is private down there too. So I'm sure there's some doctors that, even if they suspect it, they're,
Well, and there's the whole, our child abuse pediatricians are really, really taking the brunt down here right now. And there's I believe, an effort underway to try to intimidate them and to stop reporting this abuse. And
from medical people, other medical people, or?
I think it's coming from parents' rights organizations. And I think they're being manipulated by people who are claiming that they didn't do it. But yet there's never been a police investigation. Now, and we'll be very clear, this is child abuse. And if all you have is a CPS investigation, you don't have any determination of probable cause. That's not what they do. There needs to be a police investigation on all of these cases. And oftentimes there isn't on any of them. I mean,
well, that cheered me up.
I'm actively trying to report a child death and I can get no movement. And I'm a cop. And
these are kids.
And I'm using cop resources.
You're creeping me out.
Let me clarify. A potential child murder, right? Don't know, but there's a lot of evidence that needs to be looked into that they're just like, so far, everyone's like, oh, it's a podcaster. Well, it doesn't matter. I get it. There's some nuts out there. We all get it. And I went through 3 years with this person writing a book. I know her level of research. And I also, if you listen to the podcast, you'll realize the information she has, and it is pretty stunning. Oh, by the way, after that child died in season 6, I'm sorry to skip around a bit.
Well, that's okay.
That offender then went on to become the director of patient advocacy for the Guthrie Jackson Foundation. And if the name Guthrie sounds familiar, that's Guthrie Rinker, a multi-marketing company that was famous for Proactive in the 90s, and then Tony Robbins' Ascent, if you know who that is, who was a self-help guru. Very wealthy people. Victoria Jackson was a makeup mogul. So two very rich people who got married, and their daughter has the disease, and they created this foundation that they put $80 million of their own money in it. And it's got donations from, it's very Hollywood adjacent. And she was patient. She then became the patient advocacy director for a disease that her son may or may not have had. We don't know because it's never been investigated. There's ample evidence that she is capable of committing. I mean, she's already poisoned one child. By the way, the little boy, he came in on multiple occasions with polymicrobial blood infections in his medical treatment. And Dr. Ness is on audio saying this. So it's, God. If it's just extremely hard to get people to want to do hard things on this. And they're very hard things, and there's pushback.
Very hard things and things they don't understand.
Lisa did lose her job when Andrew reached out to Guthrie Jackson Foundation for a comment. She did lose her job. They did not know. And in their defense, she probably got a deferred adjudication, which means that's off your record once you complete probation. So a standard background check is not going to reveal anything. And there wasn't hardly anything on it on the internet about the case because it was 25 years ago.
Right.
And, at least they fired her. They haven't come out and really dealt with it, but that's their business. But seriously, I wish people would listen to that season. I think it's a very moving season. Hopefully.
I have something else to listen to.
8 hours of your life, but it's worth it. There's 8 episodes, and they're about an hour each.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll just give you the final word. Is there anything you wanted to make sure that people knew for sure?
Well, I can be reached at Mike Weber Consulting, Weber with 1B. I do trainings nationwide on this abuse. I'm leaving for South Carolina in the morning to do a training on Friday. And I train really to any discipline that has contact with children. If these kids are in school, teachers have medical histories 8 hours a day, and it's way different than what mom is reporting to the doctor if this abuse is happening. And I've had school nurses report this abuse that have led to criminal cases. So it can be school nurses, your child advocacy centers. I've done training for them. Very happy to be doing a training for judges very soon. The family court judges. That is very, very needed.
Sounds like it.
We will see. I am available for a price. I am retired. I got to have some supplemental income for training, and we can discuss that if y'all reach out to me.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe and to like this video. You can listen on Apple Podcast and Spotify. This is Todd Rennebaum saying, make your beds and take your meds. Keep watching for more interviews with incredible people telling their stories of resilience and adversity with mental health and mental illness.